Super. There'll probably be more people to arrive, but we'll get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and welcome to the launch event for Little Quakes Every Day, the new full-length poetry collection from Caroline Hardaker and published by Valley Press. I'm Sarah Davey from the Northern Writers Studio, and I am your host this evening, live from rural Northumberland. We're so pleased that so many of you have joined in tonight and fully imagine you all in full evening dress with champers and canapés or crisps and pop, whatever it is that you fancy. And we can't wait to celebrate with you. As you probably have noticed in the bottom corner, we're joined tonight by author, illustrator and political cartoonist Chris Riddell. Chris is going to be live illustrating the entire event, including Q&As, so I'm going to be really careful what I say. And we're super excited to see his work as the night goes on. We've already had some sneak peeks. So here's how we're going to do the evening. We've got readings from guest poets, Russell Jones and Joe Brandon, and then Caroline's going to read from her new collection. Right across the night as well, we'll be looking at Chris's illustrations. And then at the end of the evening, we'll have some time for Q&As. So if anyone has a question, pop it in the Q&A box and I'll get to as many of those as I can. Before we get started, I just want to quickly tell you about the Northern Writers Studio. So we bring writers together through workshops, groups, networking and events, and are champions of Northern writers. So we're really pleased to help Caroline celebrate tonight. You can find out more about us by visiting our website or following us on social media. After the event, I'll also send an email out to everyone with links to all of the writers and everyone who's here tonight, with links to their websites and how you can buy their books, including obviously the book of the night, Little Quakes Every Day. So if that's all right with everyone, we'll get going, and I'd like to say hello to our very first guest poet, Russell Jones.
Hello everyone, thanks for having me along, and I'm really pleased to come and celebrate the launch of Caroline's book. If you haven't read it, then get on it right now. Caroline's a really brilliant writer who I've been speaking to a lot for a few years now, but I was just drawn to her work because she's really interested in kind of fables and dark stories, and I'm sure that will become apparent tonight. And based on that, I've kind of selected a few poems from my most recent collection, which I feel fit those kinds of themes to stay on theme with Caroline. And the first one is called The Pink River Dolphins of Peru. And it's about a kind of myth, a Peruvian myth, that these pink river dolphins, which do exist, would visit towns and impregnate the women who happened to be near the rivers at the time, as a way of sort of describing how they might have got pregnant if you didn't know who the father was in particular, I believe. But anyway, this is The Pink River Dolphins of Peru. She lay on the banks of the Amazon, sang of capybara. Oh, my long-toothed love, great guinea, come to me, come. That was all. Near innocence, wet hair drying. It grew dark, she tells the town months later when she swells like spring waters. I was alone. So they gather with dead fish to tempt him. He bites, chatters, pink as Cantuta, stands accused. They don't need more evidence than his serrated, erectile jaw, his guilt-loaded eyes. Waters break. The town floods in to see her birth. Humans scream from bottlenose, waving five-prong flipper, umbilical or blowhole. It's common here, the midwife reports. A real myth. Please stay away from the riversides. This next poem was turned into a comic. I'll just briefly show a little bit of it. Oh no, it wasn't. Sorry, the one after this was. I'm getting ahead of myself. This one isn't a comic, but it's based on a story that you'll surely recognize. It's called Salt and Oats. This could help you live forever. Warm the water in a milk pan, add your oats, stir in salt, let it rest. Take breakfast in the woods, listen to the birds, find a house ridden with hair, test the beds. Should you be woken, run. Don't stop, The bears are furious, honed on your scent. Quick, let them follow. Set the traps. Wait until the wood is silent. And the next poem is a comic that was illustrated in my collection. I'll just show you a very brief double pager there. And this was illustrated by Edward Ross. But the poem is called Apples for Grandma. One thing you might need to know, apple seeds contain a trace amount of cyanide. Apples for Grandma. Cut the wire, scale back the barbs, grip the wicker between your teeth. Quiet, the orchard dog is fast asleep. Creep far through the fallen leaves and fruits. Strip the trees. Take your fill, but do not eat. These apples are for Grandma. Big eyes, long nose, sharp teeth. Through the forest unnoticed past the howling wolves to home, sweet home. Kiss her gently, remove the skin, core the flesh, roll the pastry, bake Grandma a delicious apple seed pie. And now away from kind of fairy tales and so on to, well, really just kind of dark, a dark poem in keeping with Caroline, set in my past. This one's called The Races. Blood black and yellow fingertips, like the finches you bought us after your biggest win. Waving racing slips, a fold of 50s, a whiskeyed grin. We took the birds home in cages, tattered songs fresh from the gates, until they flew for freedom and fell, necks broken on the windows. And you laughed when we cupped our ears along the hare hills. Your misplaced shot sent the horses and keen boys bolting, bright eyes and legs burning. The sun swallowed on your knife edge. You drove us to the races then, to see the fat-fingered, gold-plated men, to learn the draw and lull of a misspent Sunday with a chip butty, bash shandy, a quick dip in a quiet world, and home again. I want you to know we whispered when you were gone, threw darts at the furred catch draining on the hook. Its dark eyes seemed to blink at us, the nags on the TV, the wild birds singing through the curtains. This next poem came to me when I was in Florida, and if you've ever been to Florida, you'll know that there's alligators everywhere. And I was with my partner, and I thought, you know, if you wanted to kill off your partner, this would be a good place to do it, because you could simply just push them towards the alligators, and they have no trouble, really, I think. Anyway, this is for my partner. That's a joke. She's lovely. It's called the Alligator Get Out Clause. Prehistory, an evil eye, sinister, sleek, Mississippi Isis, walking Appalachian, taut, primed to roll a grizzled submarine. The alligator owns the pool, the 18 holes, the bayou parking lot riverside. Beware your trespass, ancient, hungry, vacant. The alligator does not care about your kids, your direct debits, cholesterol, insurance waivers. The alligator does not know forgiveness. It's inhumanly patient. Long and quiet, you cease in its alien eyes. When it moves, don't resist. The alligator has spent millennia perfecting its bite. And I'm going to finish with another comic poem that's also being turned into a short film, but you can see a little bit of the comic here, which was illustrated by Caroline Grebel. And this was written far before the pandemic and so on, but I feel it's got an echo of that. Anyway, I'll finish with this, and before that, go buy Caroline's book. It's wonderful. An official guide to surviving the invasion. They're hurt as we are by misery. Close the cupboard doors. Lock the children inside. Don't open the tinned peaches for a fortnight. Reduce the hours you sleep. Insomnia is bleak. Avoid friends and family, games, TV. Blow out all the candles. Under no circumstances should you sing. They may appear human. Don't panic. Stay vigilant. Your morale is vital to international security. If consumed, if you hear their caterwaul, scream your failures and insecurities. Wait for our signal. At the 2-minute siren, light a fire quick before they find you and burn everything you keep dear. Thank you.
Russell, thank you so much for that. It's really lovely to meet you and get to know you through your work. And I don't know if you were able to keep like an eye on what Chris was doing, but it was marvelous in the bottom corner there.
I'll rewatch it for sure.
Absolutely. We're recording it. So yeah, no problem. Thank you so much. And as well, thank you for promoting Caroline's book, but we'll also provide links to all of your work as well, because Russell's also a published poet with work in anthologies and obviously comics as well there. And a lot more. Thank you so much. Jo.
Hello
there. Where are you calling in from? I forgot to ask Russell. It's Edinburgh, isn't it, Russell? You're calling in from tonight. And where are you coming in from tonight, Jo?
Wakefield. Yeah.
Super. What are you reading from? You're reading from your collection Cures, which is up and coming with Valley Press.
Yep, so it comes out with Valley Press in January next year. So this is a bit of a preview. They're just 2 poems from there. And I wanted again to think about the themes in Caroline's beautiful collection, because basically it's jam-packed with all of my favourite things. I think I've told you this already, but for those of you that haven't read it yet, you're in for a treat, because there's myths and history and fascinating women. So I really wanted to have those on my mind when I chose my 2 poems for today. And congratulations, by the way, on publishing this beautiful collection.
Thank you. Took me a while to unmute. Thank you.
I'm glad that we all get to celebrate with you tonight. So so I'll read my my 2 poems. The first one is called Staying Under. My mother was turned away from her neighbour's door with me in arms, though she were lonely enough to eat her own hair. But what is loneliness next to the transgression of ill-wishing, the ill-wishing a woman brings if she leaves her bed too soon, goes from under her husband's roof, knocks on any other than the church door, is unclean, does pollute with newborn cries and the smell of unchanged sheets. I will never be turned away like her. 9 months I've spent gathering reeds, loosening limp heather, pulling at straws, weaving a smaller roof, my husband's in miniature, that will perch over my hair like a Spanish hood, a daintier thatch that will protect their look, a twist and turn about the proper way of things, I'm sure they'll say. They prefer to bind me abed with close walls and the stifling heat of summer-lit fires. But they can't chastise the rightness out of this. I could almost have laughed to Mother Moon these past nights as I stole big-bellied up our ladder, swifter than the fox that eyes my coop. Sure-footed, I thin my husband's roof while stonily he sleeps. Now I have my churching veil my saint's gable, a talisman of patched logic. I will not set foot from under roof too soon. And this next poem, I don't know if anyone else is really mesmerised by Chris's drawings, but my eye keeps travelling them. They're beautiful. Thank you so much for doing that. So I love it when serendipitous little links come up between poems, because I also have a salt-themed poem, Russell. So this is called Salt Song. Holdfasts and sea whips, urchins and sponges, sun coral and rock weed. Their shy brine glimmer hosts a flash of dorsal and gill, shimmer of scale and fin, of fingers and breasts and hair and skin. I tell drowning men that the song of my sisters sinks no ships. They flounder, disbelieving. I tell them foolhardy horizon skimmers, blunt bows and split decks faster than the sun sets. Under they go, life frayed as old rope. What would we do with them all? Can't beach them like whales, can't set straight stern and sails to send them on their way again. Can't fix their bodies that are too much water already. But we foam flicker, skim their sinking and linger like kelp. A last song leaves our lips and fills their mouths. They gulp euphoria, their boots and bellies leaden with it, till they are shored of bed, as deep as the world goes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Jo. And I'm really excited to read the rest of the collection when it comes out from Valley Press. And you've got two of a pamphlet in the collection from Valley as well, haven't you?
I do, yeah. Phobia and The Learned Goose. Yeah.
I love it. The thing I'm enjoying possibly the most are the titles of everyone's poems, because they feed into my love of things that are a bit different. And I especially, yeah, I'm really enjoying these. Well, thank you both so much. It was really lovely to have you both here. Russell and Jo both know Caroline and have read her work and edited her work. So it's been a lovely circle of connections. And now we're going to speak to Caroline, who I've got a connection with. We did a script writing course with the Live Theatre in 2012. And it's just absolutely lovely to, well, 8 years on, unfortunately, but it's absolutely lovely to see Caroline succeed and help us celebrate the launch of this poetry collection. Hello.
Oh, thank you. I can't believe it was that long ago. That's terrifying.
It is, yeah.
That makes me feel old. Yeah.
So how did you get from scripts to poems?
That's a good question. I think my journey into poetry was actually not the usual one. Like I've never studied poetry. I did English literature at university, but I didn't particularly do any poetry. I did mostly fiction and drama. But then there was a time, maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, when I saw an open call for a poetry anthology, and it was asking for poems about myths and magical stuff. I think it was yetis and things. And I just thought, what? You can write poems about yetis? I just thought they were always like diary entries and, you know, professing love and all that kind of thing. And then it made me realize that poems actually don't have to be like that. They're stories about anything. They can be personal, they can be third person. And because I really liked writing drama, it spoke to me in the sense that these are little monologues in a way. And you can be anyone, you can be any character you want. And that was how I started. So I entered this anthology, and the poem was about, it sounds really stupid now, but it was about someone that eats tinsel at a Christmas party in order to be more attractive. And they wanted it. And I thought, hey, this is good. So I just kept doing it and got more into it and expanded what I wrote about, not just people eating tinsel. And that was it. And that was maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, maybe a little bit more. It's hard to remember now. Blurs into the past. So that was it, really.
Well, so obviously it's incredibly exciting to come here to Little Quakes Every Day, which you can buy right now from Valley Press. And I'm really looking forward to hearing you read. So you're going to read from the 3 different sections and you're going to give us a little bit of information about how they connected as well as you go.
Yeah, I will, and I'll start if you want. Would you like me to start?
That would be lovely.
Super. Well, yeah, so this is the book, Little Quakes Every Day. And yeah, so it's a full-length collection of poetry, and it is split into 3 sections. So the first is histories, the second is discoveries, and the third is inventions. But they're all tied together by the nature of discovering, whether it's a historical discovery by someone who's famous from the past, or a kind of everyday surprising discovery that we make all the time. Or in the case of the third section, it's a bit more sci-fi in terms of speculative discoveries and inventions. So there's one poem that's split between the 3 sections, and it starts each section. And I'm going to start by reading that. It doesn't actually have a title, but I just call it Giants. It's kind of the story on the cover page. But here we go. Even buried giants rumble, groan in their sleep, and dream dreams of daylight. So they thrust up oaks to judge the wild stuff. Ghosts and more roots and smoke, mouths full of their own fruit, and each bolt of lightning brightens the sky, but only for a second, and then it is dark again. That's the first one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a few from each section. So I'm going to start with the history section. And this one was written from a photograph that I saw in the National Geographic, of all places. But if any of you are poets or writers of any kind of eco stuff, National Geographic is just the best place to go for any kind of inspiration. But anyway, that's where I got this photo. So this is on polar bears brought together by the death of a humpback whale. The boulders approach, grown with hoary turf and smudging rune marks across the tundra. A moving tide to mount the hunt that's found. Jaws meet in many places to break the hide. In the belly, brothers do not know brothers. Skins smell of sleep, birth blood lost, and the beasts take turns to tear out the swim bladder or fists of blubber. The bears are tied together with ropes of knotted gut, and each hollows out his grotto from fat, oiling his coat as if preparing for battle in woad, but white as snow. Drifts of broad backs reinvent Genesis. Slow stomachfuls last a day, a night, a day, and pressing for the last, boulders roll in the colossal arch, ribs hanging above like paths of comets. After the feast, blood flecks the ice like constellations, and then, stones in a round, each brother licks his sores and retreats alone. The supernova shatters and the whale shrinks. So there you go. There's quite a lot of poems in the collection about animals or people taking on animal form. This one in particular. So this one is again in the history section, and it's about Thomas Edison, of all people, who you probably know, but yeah, he's one of the most prolific inventors of all time. He contributed or invented the light bulb, phonograph, motion picture camera, all sorts of things. And one of the things that made his life was when he was 12, he almost completely lost his sense of hearing. But he saw that as a really good thing because it meant no one could interrupt him. And I think that says quite a lot about Thomas Edison. And I wrote this poem when I read a fact that he wasn't particularly a fan of company, and he taught his second wife to speak Morse code so that they could talk secretly by tapping on each other's arms and have probably snidey little conversations with each other. So this is Afternoon Tea with the Millers. My dear, days like today remind me that I'm glad I married you and not your family. I am the fox in the farmyard, drinking the dairy's sour milk under the dim gaze of the slow cow, seated betwixt juvenile pigs squinting in monocles and pernickety hens stuffed into lace dresses, pecking at yesterday's conversational crumbs. It's been more than 3 hours now, and I can hardly bear to listen another moment to your mother's clucking or your father's crowing. All feathers and bluster, without a speck of doing around this idle table, sat with defiantly single, unfitting cogs. Note how your father fondles his moustache with a fancy for his own words, always landlocked concepts looping. He sets off on a venture, only to return to the same end as before, but in another guise, wearing another hat. Still, always the same upturn of his nose and bellows that I can't fathom through that haystack beard. See how his eyes flick between you and I and your cousins for a rise, or a smile, often at my own expense. Oh, he says, it's enough to give an ideas man ideas. I play the clam ear here, preferring to feign isolation than to lie outright. Oh, the flame is lit inside, and it's a wonder my ears aren't smoking. See how your mother tuts at my fingertip. Poor over-affectionate Edison. You've addled his brain, Mina. He touches you insistently. The muse has made of him a mute. Perhaps I would reply if the tea, dry as tinder, didn't stick so on the fox throat which longs to swallow them whole. Thank God for bare wrists, Mina. I hope you're picking all this up over their squawking. Your soft head nods and kind-hearted purrs. Tell them sweetly, feline, that I don't speak goose. So there you go. Edison was a bit of a bitch, in my opinion. Okay, and then the next one is another history poem. And I like kind of weird things that have happened in history. And I was reading about a circus in Bolton in the UK, in England. In 1872, there was a performer who was a lion tamer. And he was called Thomas McCart, but he went by the Great Massarti. And he was performing, I think, Manda's Menagerie it was called. And he had 4 lions in his act, which were like his kids. But ultimately, and predictably, he was mauled and killed by his own lions in front of the audience. So this is a series of tiny monologues from the people involved. I'll say people, but the things involved. So the Great Massarti goes into liquidation. In the news, sons in plot to supplant father from family business. The household lies in disarray, their father in pieces. Quote, I am a giant, chained under the shadow of a weak skin strip, armed with a wooden chair and whip. My pedestal stands atop my cage. At my call, I will pull the cord in my jaws, bringing down the velvet on Massarti's neck. I hear you, brother, and taste the rise of murder on the licks of our father's firewheel. His stump smells of pulled muscles and triumph. I'll leap through the rings of rib to hunt the heart. His talent will linger long on my lips. Oh, lustful blood and skillful execution. I will hold his hip in service to my brothers. Allow me to eat the bowel, and I will step down to the wings when the time comes. Massarti's belly in my belly, an echo on an echo. My brothers, I love my father, but I love you more. I am the dancer far upstage, eyes to the clicking of your clogs, while mine misstep a second slower. I will take Massarti's mane for my own, limp puppet strings and manhood on which to graze. There you go, kind of sinister, death by giant cat. And then next, so this is the last one in this section. And this one is about a mythological figure called the Morrigan. And I actually wrote this one as a libretto for an opera, which ended up premiering in London in September. And the Morrigan is she comes across quite often actually in like computer games now and contemporary literature. She's quite a cool goddess, but she's a shape-shifting goddess of war, foretelling doom, various other things. So I'm going to read you a poem about her. And I'm holding the book sideways because it's printed sideways, this one. But anyway, this is The Morrigan Meets a Lover on the Battlefield. We are a black arrow above war, compass west, a slash of moon and jagged flapping, like a hinged wooden thing hunting wet and red iron in the rain. There, we crow dive and are in the mud, grasping the axe with your eyes in our mouth. But soft, soft, we melt like wax in the lamplight of your face. Oh, bright one with flickering heart, we dream less prophetic dreams after we eat. But why are your pockets so full of feathers? Why does your woman wear an oily plume in her coat? Did you know, child, that winged and over water we're reborn, not once, but twice? Not you, you've already gone. So rise, thief. It snows on the fells and the wild mare runs like thunder, anger, and dread. Yay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
So I
That's the
suppose
first section.
a question that pops into my head that other people might ask as well is, how did you pull the poems together? Did you have the overall structure, or were they written independently and you pulled them together?
So they were all written independently. So I had maybe about 20% of the poems when I think I started to pull it together when the previous collection, Bonavation, was coming out, which was 3 years ago. And at that point, I had about 20% maybe of the poems. And I thought, there's like a trend here. They're all sort of historical. They're still quite mythological, but they were dealing with inventors. And at the time I was writing quite a lot of science fiction poems as well, which dealt with speculative inventions. And I thought the idea of inventions through time, that's quite interesting, and the nature of the kind of consequences that they have on people. So I started to kind of shuffle them around a bit, and I thought, well, these are kind of historical, these are sort of futuristic, and these are just everyday. And at first I think I was at a bit of a loss to stitch them together. But then I thought, actually, naturally, if you put them in chronological order, I could have the 3 sections, and that keeps them kind of in their own chapters.
Yeah.
I do like organizing things, and that's it. And from then on, whenever I wrote more, I knew which section they would fall into, and it grew that way. So yeah.
Lovely, thank you. So next section is discoveries.
Yes, so I've got a couple from this one. So the first one, which I can already see this drawing started, is the one where the title appears, so Little Quakes Every Day. And it's another National Geographic gem. And it's kind of about chameleons in a tree, but it's really about how we're all adapting to the world all the time. We're all changing color, we're changing skins, and we're all adapting in our own way as well. So this is taxonomical divergences in Madagascar. 59 forms of the chameleon shift skins. The transitioning split further into subspecies that grow adjacent in diagonals. At sight of a similarity, their chromatophores react and strum the arms of stars, laid in lattice like stacks of harps, playing against what they see, a warning to themselves. These low plucking droplets sound under smiles, and a tuning fork strike erupts chaos of light. A newborn is thrust through the split crust of earth, where miles of plates move in little quakes every day. So that's that one. And then carrying on with the animal theme, I'll go on to the next one, which is called Stickleback. And this is another weird fact that I read. And there's a lake apparently in Switzerland where there's stickleback in the lake, which is the fish. And this lake has a really still area and an area with a current. And the fish themselves are starting to evolve into completely different species because they're either living in the current area or the pond area. So this is kind of a speculative look, I guess, of somebody that wonders what life might have been like in the other part of the lake. So this is Stickleback. Imagine that we are Stickleback. The pond is heavy but innocent. Our pockets are sewn closed, definite with stones, and we're up to the hips in things that act dead. A life in still water gives you time to think. The pond is a portrait of a stream. We're on the gallery bench, floating on our backs with arms and legs spread like sea stars, when a bone in my spine snaps and the pond becomes a projection, a film on the wall. I turn and say to you, if I spread my fins and swim the stream, will you think I don't exist? And then on to the next one, which is completely different. There's no highfalutin meanings in here. It's literally a love story between two lusty mushrooms. I don't really have any facts about this one, apart from that it's about mushrooms in love. I wrote it in a Waterstones cafe. For some reason that sticks in my head, but apart from that, yep, I'll just say it. And this is on opening a love note delivered by snail. I might just be a simple mushroom, bruised by weathers and tipped by gloom, but you're one too, though far more moonlike. I've heard you pulse your hi-fi strings many times, tripping out a melody for my shroomy ears to hear. I sang back every night to your fruiting body, gills rippling. You've been eyeing me too, lifting up your pearl skirt a little further each day, you flirt. You don't belong in that distant dirt. Look over the deciduous lap and see, I'm dipping my cap to you. It's taken me 2 weeks to twist my stem down and around. I'm sponge and open to any crushing boot to stamp your way. I'd choose to be the one broken in two if it gave you an extra day. Listen, if we both move, migrate, we can start our patch in half the time. Picture the young spores we'll have, little meteorites, throbbing mycelium love notes like stars to illuminate our wilting days. They might inherit your egg shine or the convex of my cap. They'll bulb up all clean and we'll rub up the cusps of each other until we stick, blunting memory smudges of where we've been, the underneaths only we've seen, all raw ribs. I can't wait to metabolize matter with you, consume a legume or two. We can be casual at first, bloom and then shrink under tented matters as we feed our buttoned galley, the family. I get softer with age, so to be tender with me. I take in the sun through a skinless skull. Consider the sensitivity when you respond. Send the messenger snail back forthwith with your answer. He's not the quickest, you know, and for us, time is of the essence. So there you go. Sticking with the kind of insect theme, the next one, and I always think this has a little bit of a sci-fi edge to it, but it's not. It's a look at the ant. So it's a look at the ant as if he was on trial and all of the different testimonies from all the different parts involved in his life. So yes, the lowly ant. So this is an ant on trial and the subsequent dialogue. As to the leaf, great teeth, carriers of cadavers, quarter me, O bringer of sides, followed by the aphid. Mother, feeder, leader, lover, coaxer, mixer, stroke my back for honeydew, milk. I know you. The sparrow spoke. Titbit, flicking morsel, a bite of red and bitterness. Quick, find 100 by the hill, the little clamps pinch. The domestic cat, a plaything, little darting thing. Cover, pause over. There you are, uncover, repeat, eat. Empty, look for another, look at feet. Man, thwarted, thieves of sweetmeats, self-blame, shame, spilt sugar fields, medicate, sanitate, spray, wipe away remains. And then the earth concluded, swarm, or pause, billions in capillaries, ground's marrow, first and last conquerors. And then I have one more from the middle section. And this one is one of the only poems I've written which is based on something that actually happened. Usually I don't do that. So I used to work in the museum service, and occasionally I would go into the stores, so where they keep the collections, with volunteers or whoever. And one time I was in there, I came across a little cardboard box with like lots of wrinkly Tyvek, which is kind of tissue, that's kind of, it protects collections. And in that there was this teeny weeny little shoe which had belonged to a woman in China, I think in the 1800s, who had had her feet bound, and it was gorgeously embroidered, and it just really struck how much of a contradiction it was that there would be such pain in wearing those things and having her feet bound from such a young age, but also how beautiful they were and how hidden they were beneath the garments, the long garments that she would have worn. So I wrote this poem about that, and this is Little Shoe. It shone, a world on a little satin thing poking through the rows of wrinkled Tyvek, a ruby to slip a lily into. Lifting it from the case, I sit it on one cottoned palm, fingers fanning beneath like a lark's wing around an egg or a teacup, stitched from sun silk and curving to a point slim enough to perch on the thumb loop of a girl painting a sky she watched in childhood. All her favourite garden sights, bluebirds, tamed hoopoes, palm swifts and peach of blushing cheek, and perching proudly amongst trickling vines and lagoon blue. Hosts of cloud-like lotus flowers falling in a white flush of doves, swooping on the whistle crack of wind up from the stone floor. Scenes from before this life of little stitches. Shuffling steps on fists of flesh, in groups of golden lilies tipped with red and held together by hands grasping sisters' sleeves. Tied in this amorphous knot of quiet, each face meets another, mouthing the name inked in a bird's nest of strokes hidden inside her shoes. So that's the second section.
Absolutely lovely. I really love the little shoe. I worked in museums too, so I know what Tyvek is. It's a bit of a niche thing.
No, I did put that in the notes at the back as well, just in case nobody knew what Tyvek was.
Yeah,
but
it's an amazing
I didn't know
thing.
you worked in museums.
I did. I worked at Beamish and for the National Trust as well. Yeah. Many years
Very
ago.
nice.
Yeah. So animals. I'm just animals. They run through almost everything. Do you find that they do? I mean, they're in everything. The majority of your poems. Do you end up having to find out a little bit? Do you start with the spark of an animal, or do you read something about an animal and that sparks a poem? Is there a way into it?
It depends. Sometimes, yeah. So sometimes, because I do get a lot of inspiration, at least for this sort of poem, from magazines and articles online, and often they are about ecological stuff, which does involve animals. So I tend to move from that. I don't think I realized I wrote about them so much until this happened. And I thought, oh my God, because even with the afternoon with the Millers, they're people, but I've turned them all into farmyard animals. So I'm not sure what that's about particularly, but I have always been a massive fan of animals, I have to say. And I guess because all of the poems are kind of about nature, human nature, but the earth as well, and connections to the earth, I guess animals just come in quite naturally, I suppose. Yeah.
So next we're moving on to inventions, which is section 3.
So the third section, yes it is. So the third section's a bit more, I've just got a 3 from this one, and it's a bit more speculative, it's a bit more sci-fi. Saying that, the first poem I'm going to read is another one based on a photograph that I think I just saw in an article online. It wasn't in National Geographic this time. And it comes across a bit like a horror story, but it happened apparently, and I saw the photo. So this is a hermit crab makes his home inside a doll's head. So this time it's a crab. Seated, he is a fist, and when he crawls, an open hand. His underbelly roars a fig's middle. His weakness drags the sand, an immature length born for burial. Crawl on it, curl it into the segments of palm, pretend it doesn't exist. Seek, slowly seek and find a sheltering place, a red womb. Here, a bulbous cove to birth a safer world, half within and half without. He thrusts a naked thumb inside the head and up through the neck, clamps the cheek behind the teeth with a cooling uropod, a hook with an eye for darkness. Such a find, this ruddy pink rock. Only a limpet or two live within, and on the skin, a pair of sky-cast barnacles watch the stars for one last time before they sleep. The end, the beginning. Sometimes you see a face in the rock pool. Children hide in mothers' coats, men blink and look away. A baby's head drags across the seabed in jolts. Two white cast runes, lids always open. And that is a terrifying drawing that I can see in the bottom corner. Oh my God, it's just fresh from my imagination. Thank you. Okay, and then the next one is a bit more of a sci-fi one. So this is taking me back to A-level physics. And this is about the 4 fundamental forces. So there are 4 fundamental forces in the universe that govern everything we do. So it's like gravity, electromagnetism, strong force and weak force. And this was me imagining that scientists had discovered that there was a 5th one. So I usually give a disclaimer when I read this. If there's any scientists here, I'm sorry. This might not be scientifically accurate, but you never know. So anyway, see if you can guess what the force might be. So this is the issue of the day. It has been discovered that what's known of the 5th fundamental force is the trace of the thing itself. The target has the intrinsic ability to evolve away from its common design into something that cannot be judged, measured, or predicted. It's as if this force has anticipated the immediate and acted prior to its own arrival. The smallest shift, moving in simultaneous alignment with its own phantom. Researchers have tried to evaluate its purpose for years, but remain vague, and every time they're on the news, they look younger. So there you go. And then I've only got one more poem to read, which is very near the end of the book. It's not the last one, it's the second last one, but it very easily could have been the last one. And it's very short and simple, but it's one that I really like. And it's kind of a look at endings and beginnings and how they are often the same thing. So this is Knitting Needles. She picks up the needles to prove that old string is also a blossoming web of tight knots, only unraveled, sleeping in an armchair. She smiles at the phrase, she twists in the melody. Dropped stitches can be as comely as lace when they're remembered, and each tied off end is a beginning. And that's it. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Caroline. So the collection is Little Quakes Every Day from Valley Press by Caroline Hardaker. I absolutely love it. For a poetry book launch, I'm a self-proclaimed person who doesn't understand a lot about poetry. I write flash fiction, short fiction, and speculative fiction. but I'm absolutely falling in love with it as I read more poetry collections, and particularly the way that this relates to the little things that happen every day, which I think you've talked about in a couple of interviews as well. But also the way it's kind of a collection of your life experiences and your interests as well, because you're interested in sort of art and supernatural and science and discoveries.
Yeah, and I think all of those sorts of things, whether it's history stories or mythological tales or whatever it is, they all kind of have the same human nature at their heart anyway. And you find this if you read, like I remember a year or two ago, I was listening to an audiobook, and it was the Diary of Samuel Pepys. And he's like in the 1600s, and people have not changed at all. Which I look, he would still be like, every New Year, he'd be like, right, I'm not buying any more books, I'm not buying any more drink. And then January 2nd, he was drunk in a ditch somewhere. And I just think they run through everything. So there's natural ways of tying stories together. And that's what I kind of see poems as, because I'm not like I've never been like a lifelong poetry person, but once you start seeing them as little stories or monologues, then I think they become a lot more accessible. Because I think quite often there feels like there's barriers between poetry and people, but there really doesn't have to be. It really doesn't. And there's so many good, including like Jo and Russell. There's so many amazing contemporary poets out there who write really, really interesting stuff. So yeah, I like to think that I'm hopefully trying to make it a little bit more accessible to people. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's what I love about it, is the way they all stand alone, but the way they tie together as well. It's really beautiful. I've also been enjoying looking back. Chris has just flicked through all the pictures like a beautiful little mind's eye view. There are a couple of little questions in the Q&A, and then if Russell and Jo have got anything as well. One of them I think you touched on in your taxonomical divergences in Madagascar. That's a mouthful. I believe the title Little Quakes Every Day comes from a poem within the collection, but why did you choose that particular phrase as the title? I'm going to read the PS, although he might not want me to. If this has already been explained to your husband, please forgive him. He is forgetful and easily distracted by his wife's success.
Oh, God. Okay. Yes, it has been explained to him before why it's called that. But yeah, I think, well, it didn't have a name for quite a while. Or I think maybe it did, but it was just a working title. So I always knew that I needed to find a title for it. And it wasn't until it was in its almost finished form that we had the title. And then I did just look through all the poems and try and find little poetic phrases that were relevant to as many poems as possible and tied them together. And then when I read that the Little Quakes Every Day phrase, and the phrase Little Quakes comes up, I think 3 times in the collection as well. But the explicit phrase was in the Chameleon poem. And I'd written it to describe kind of the fact that our lives that are full of little quakes all the time, like little things happen to, well, little and big, happen to us all the time, every day, and we're constantly adapting to the change or just trying to adapt to everything that happens to us. So that phrase just seemed like the best way to go, because it described, you know, the quakes that have happened in history, like big, well, there's literally dinosaurs in this as well. So things that happen to them all the way through to the possible quakes of the future as well. So that's where the phrase came from. I can't remember what the other possibles were now, but that one just, once I wrote a list, that one just seemed the best.
I hope you're looking at what Chris has drawn underneath there. If anyone can't read it, it's a drawing of Mr. Hardaker saying Caroline's having one of her daily quakes. And this is very lovely.
Yeah, and that's my shoe.
Be careful what we say. I'm just going to have a look.
Watching that right now.
Quite a few questions, so I'm going to pick a few out if that's all right. Actually, Gina says, did you realise that Wallace the Lion is stuffed and resides in Sunderland Museum?
No, I didn't, but I should have known that.
And I do know that as well, because that's I'm from Sunderland. She thinks it's the same line as your poem, and she loved the Edison poem. So a visit.
Yeah. I do think one of them was called Wallace, now that I think about it, because they had really similar names to each other. Oh, I didn't know that, but I really should have known that, because I've been to that museum like a couple of times, but it was such a long time ago, before I was doing poems and before I was writing about lions. So I'll have to go at some point when everything
Yeah.
opens again and have a look.
Judith wants to say that you gave great context for the poems in the history section in particular. She wants to know, was it hard to make the final selection for the book? Are there poems that didn't make the cut?
Yes, there were. So there was probably way too many originally. But that happens when you're doing your first full collection, because it could be a range of different lengths. But yeah, I think I did quite a lot of self-selection at first, in terms of just how strong I felt they were, or whether something covered something in more than one way. So I tried to stay away from things that were too similar. But then when it came to editing the book for Valley Press with Jo, who's here. So Jo was my editor as well. She helped a lot with choosing which ones weren't maybe the best fit. And so I think we cut a further 3 or 4 or something. But generally, it happened quite naturally. I think it was harder for my previous book, Born Ovation, to work that out, because that's a chapbook and they're just quite a lot shorter. And the theme for that was kind of a bit more open than this. So it wasn't too much of a struggle. And I think because I'd been writing it for so long as well, I'd had such a long time to think about it. So yeah, it worked out okay. And I'm really pleased with the ones that we chose in the end, definitely.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I haven't gotten to, there was quite a few questions there. One that came up a couple of times, and I wonder if all of you mind giving me a tiny little line, is if quite a few people are looking for tips or encouragement on getting started with writing poetry. And I wonder if any of you have got any tiny tips that people could take away who are maybe thinking about starting or trying to get published. It's quite hard, I know.
It is a hard one, because with me, I just had to go.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was doing. And I think what attracted me to it was the fact that it can be free verse, and you can try whatever you like, and you can have real fun with rhythms and so on. But I have done since then, a few years ago, I did do a couple of courses, which were 6 weeks. I think there was 6 weeks, and they're all online, and they're run by the Poetry School. And they're paid courses, but I think if you're struggling, they offer a hardship fund as well for people. But there's a whole range of different themes, and some of my best poems were written for those. So I think I did one on the natural environment. I did one on history stuff, not surprisingly. And it's just nice to be part of a group that meets every week to kind of look at what everyone's done, and you get a lot of background and you get a lot of help. And I would really recommend that one of those courses, whichever one interests you. And they do help you out if you struggle with the fees and stuff. So that's my recommendation, I think.
Thank you. Jo, have you got anything?
Well, I'm not sure how original my tips would be, but my 2 top tips would be to write and not care about failing, because I think sometimes it's so easy to sit in front of a computer or a page and I'm going to write a poem, and then it doesn't turn out how you want. So write to fail, I think, or write to have fun sometimes. Yeah. And also just read lots of poems. So you've already got a head start if you're here listening to Caroline's poems, and lots of little independent journals that sort of need support. That's a really good way to hear lots of contemporary poetry and get a sense of what's going on.
Brilliant. And Russell, obviously you edit a poetry journal as well, don't you?
Yeah, I've edited a few anthologies and poetry journals. I would say, I wholeheartedly agree with the advice that's given. As particularly stressed, reading contemporary poetry is important. A lot of submissions that I see that are kind of not automatically rejected, but that just don't quite sound right to me, are by people who clearly only read old poetry, and so they sound old themselves, which doesn't quite fit. And I would just say also just to submit a lot. So once you've written poems and you've worked on them with your friends or group, as Caroline suggested, just submit them and be ready to get rejected a lot. It's just going to happen, unfortunately, but it's not about you. It's just the poem, and it's sometimes not right for that person. But just keep going, because we've all been there. We all had hundreds or thousands of rejections, and the only reason any of us have got books out is because we just kind of pushed past that.
Yeah. And the Booker Prize
Yeah.
winner, he was rejected 30 times by agents apparently. So, but
70
he just
times rejected. I beat him there.
oh well, look, I've got it.
I haven't got a Booker Prize, but
Well, you know, I think that's maybe
No,
better.
but you've got
You've got us.
no, yeah, there's definitely you've got us, and yeah, you've got so many books and novels now and everything, and it just shows. I mean, I've had loads of rejections as well, but to be honest, I think now they're just because you know that it's not personal in any degree. It's just literally, you know, if I was editing a book or a magazine, I've got my own tastes. It doesn't mean something else that I'm not keen on is not good. It just means it doesn't fit my taste or the theme of the book or whatever. So you can have a poem rejected a few times and then someone else, there's two people fighting over it. So
Yeah,
you never know what will happen next. But yeah, it's not personal.
yeah, and that's the hardest thing to learn. But once you can kind of get to grips with knowing that it isn't personal, it's a lot easier. But it is like you say, you've got to just get used to it. It's the hardest thing. Rejection's tough, but the more you get rejected, it means the more you're sending it out, and it means the more chance you've got of being seen, I think. So thank you all for answering that one. I know it was a bit of a big one at the end there. Well, we've got to sort of, it's not personal. I'm so distracted by the drawings. It's been an absolute joy. Thank you to everyone who's come along to listen tonight and ask questions. Thank you to Russell and Joe for coming along to support Caroline, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you through your work. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you to Chris for giving us some really joyous illustrations and for seeing inside the minds of our poets. It's been an absolute joy, and you really freely gave your time, and we're just so grateful. Thank you so much. And most of all, thank you to Caroline for writing this absolutely beautiful collection of poetry and for letting me host her poetry event. We talked about this last year when in real life things were allowed, and I'm really pleased we've managed to still make it happen despite the way things have changed. So
yeah, because we were talking about like cafes and all sorts of stuff, but this has been great because we've managed to get, because Chris has got involved now as well.
Exactly,
so yay with you guys. So yeah, it worked out really well in the end.
Lovely. Well, thank you all so much. Everyone will get an email with links to everyone's work so you can buy poetry collections and keep in touch with everyone from that. And we are going to record, well, we have been recording this, and we're going to decide, it'll probably go on Caroline's website. So if you did miss out, you'll be able to catch up. Thank you all so much. We're all going to say goodbye to each other because Sarah hasn't worked out how to host a green room in a webinar yet. So thank you, everyone, Caroline, Russell, Joe, and Chris, and everyone who's watching. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.